Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So I got some breaking news for you guys today. I just got off the phone with somebody who works for a private firm who flies out precious cargo for the State Department, and they are transporting some very sensitive cargo to very sensitive places. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You're not going to hear this information anywhere else, and it's important that we stay on top of these things the way that things are rapidly progressing around the world. I also want to talk about some other stories that are in the news today, some other breaking news. Obviously, as some of you know, our capital is currently occupied by protesters, and the Prime Minister, through a hissy fit, walked out of Parliament yesterday. Things are going down. People are defecting within the Liberal Party, so it's not looking good. The Conservatives are going to be forcing a vote today on whether or not to remove the mandates nationwide, and I don't know how much of that falls in the hands of provinces or federal government, whatever, but it's getting pretty heated. It's not looking good for the people on the ground there in Ottawa, where the police are using more heavy-handed tactics to quell these protests, and they're trying to use innovative strategies to circumvent the new laws that are being put into place, like you can't bring gas to the truckers, but it looks like they're starting to crack down on that as well. So we will see how that progresses, but there's a lot of people on YouTube posting live streams and real up-to-date information on that, so make sure you keep apprised of it. Apparently that's already spreading worldwide, whatever that means. Obviously it has political ramifications. There's going to be people who use that movement, piggyback on it for their own political interests, but I guess it's people who are passionately mobilizing around an issue, so some good hopefully will come out of it. I also want to talk about another story that was in the news today. SpaceX lost 49 satellites due to a geomagnetic storm. These satellites were carried into the atmosphere without a problem and were deployed into their intended orbit. However, once they were orbiting, there was an anomaly in the Earth's atmosphere that caused the loss of all but 9 of the quarter-ton satellites. Okay, so SpaceX claims that a geomagnetic storm is the culprit. According to the company, this storm warmed and increased the density of the atmosphere at the 210 kilometer height that the satellites were deployed at, increasing the drag on the orbiting hardware to an unsustainable degree. So if you haven't watched my talk with the NASA engineer Arthur T. Bradley, posted it last week, go and check it out. We go into great detail about geomagnetic storms, solar flares, and the impacts of various electromagnetic pulse events, high altitude nukes. This is a very real threat, guys, and this is proof that the sun has the power to potentially take down electronics, to take down the power grid, and this perhaps was just a taste of that. If you don't know, the SpaceX satellites are used for the Starlink program. That's basically wire-free internet, so satellite-based internet, high speed. I've done a review on it. You can go and check that out. Some other things that are making headlines today is the increase in inflation, which is a 40-year high. So they're saying 7.5% across the board inflation. So that doesn't parse out those recurring expenses, fixed expenses versus your non-fixed expenses. So we've talked about in this channel for the past year how it's your fixed expenses that are going up much more than 7.5%. And maybe it's your TV sets and PlayStations that are only going up 1 or 2%. Okay, stuff that you're only going to buy once. It's one and done. But it's the fixed expenses that are the real problem here. Now, there was a way that they measured the CPI prior to the 1990s, and some people have speculated that the inflation rate, the real inflation rate, is actually 6 to 8% higher than what they're saying, so it's around 15%, although there has been some pushback with respect to that theory, but I will post a link to the alternate inflation charts in the comment section below based on the shadow government statistics. Okay, I don't even like using that term because it takes a video like this and it gives it that tint of conspiracy that we don't want to demerit it. But I also want to talk about this phone call that I received from somebody who works with a private firm with the State Department. I did my best to thoroughly vet this individual. I know who they are. I know their identity. I know which company they work for. But for the sake of ensuring their own security, I'm not going to provide any personal information about them because I don't want it to come back and affect them in any negative way. So I'm going to be speaking in a very cursory manner about the information that they provided me. They have provided me the tail number of the airplane that they're flying, so I can attest to the validity of the claim that they are flying some precious payload to Kiev for the State Department. Now, he doesn't know exactly what the payload is. He's going to give me some updates in a couple days, but he said in situations that he's had like this in the past, that typically it's some sort of military hardware. This is a guy who's flown to any country you can imagine where there has been a war, okay? He's flown Ebola patients when the COVID thing was starting, COVID patients, Patriot missiles to South Korea, you name it, he's flown it. So he's saying that the only reason why he would be given a call like this on such short notice is that if they were deploying some fairly precious cargo to that region. And the fact that they're not using the U.S. military planes to do it, I think is quite telling of perhaps the relationship that NATO has established with the Ukraine, and approaching the situation tangentially and not getting directly involved in the conflict. It appears that it's going to be some sort of proxy engagement between Russia and NATO forces who are going to be feeding the Ukrainian military insurgency. I don't know what that's really going to look like. I don't know if that's going to be a success at all. There's many sides to this story, guys. I would encourage you to go and watch some of the recent videos that I've put out on the topic and go through the links in the descriptions of those videos, because they're going to provide you a lot more information about what is going on in the ground, more than I could ever cover in a short 10-minute video. So he's going to be flying that 747 over there with some precious cargo. That already left this morning to Kiev. So we know that things are starting to heat up. We've also seen that correspondence between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So we know that the Chinese and the Russians are solidifying their ties before whatever engagement takes place. And there's a good chance, and a lot of people have speculated, that if there was something to break out in the east, some distraction of sorts in which NATO was caught up in, then that would likely give China the window of opportunity to execute something in the South Pacific with Taiwan. So a lot of people are celebrating the tail end of this pandemic, but we're just moving from one crisis to another. And if these conflicts break out, it's going to make the supply chain issues that we've had look like daycare. So it's going to be a lot worse if, especially for gas prices and oil prices that are already through the roof. I think it's $1.50 a liter here to gas up. So that's a liter. That's not a gallon. So that's about $6 Canadian a gallon. I don't know what that translates in the US dollars, maybe $5 a gallon or something like that. But I do get the sense that this whole relief of the restrictions in my province, and perhaps the province next to me, Alberta, could potentially be some kind of trial run. Like, I have a suspicion that if it doesn't go well, it is going to be used to justify some kind of permanent measures that are going to be put into place. That if this opening up fails, no matter which country it fails in, if it fails, then we are going to definitely see a push for something more permanent being put into place. So let's hope the Omicron is the tail end of this pandemic and that's it. But based on the talks that I've been hearing with John Campbell, and he had an immunologist on the other day, and they were talking about how the effectiveness of the interventions are becoming less and less. Like it's not working as good every time you administer it. And it's not just because of the change in the genetic structure of the virus itself, but it's something to do with your immune system fatigue or something like that. I don't know all the details of it, but there's also the fact that this is now spreading in many different animal populations, and it's zoonotic, so it's going to be forever tormenting the human species in various different ways. The fact is, only 10 to 15% of the world's population has actually caught this thing. That means that there's 85% of people who haven't caught it yet, meaning that there's 85% of people who don't have that foolproof natural immunity, which in and of itself, of course, wanes. And of course, we're in a point in history where these types of viruses are becoming more and more common. So it's only a matter of time before another one comes around. And on top of it all, the climate's totally screwed. It's +4 degrees here today, and that's just odd for this time of year. I just think that this is going to be one hell of a year. It's going to be one hell of a decade. It's going to be one hell of a collapse of civilization as we know it. Let's just put it that way, guys. So Stay prepped, stay ready. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Canadian Prepper out.